Some moments in history arrive loudly. They announce themselves with force. Explosions, sirens, headlines that demand attention. They make sure the world knows something has changed. Other moments arrive quietly, so quietly that most people never notice them at all. They slip through ordinary rooms, at ordinary hours. They leave no debris, no witnesses, just absence. A phone resting on a desk. A light still burning long after it should be turned off. A silence that lingers longer than comfort allows. This is the story of a call that never reached the president. It was early morning, the kind of hour when cities are awake but not fully conscious, when routines move on instinct rather than intention. Office buildings hummed softly. Security doors clicked open, lights flickered to life. Coffee sat untouched, slowly losing heat. Inside a secure government building, a decision was already in motion. Not emotional, not rushed, an operation approved days earlier, planned carefully, reviewed repeatedly, signed with confidence. Once something like that begins, it doesn't rely on belief. It relies on momentum. And momentum is difficult to stop. But just before the operation was meant to unfold, something shifted. Not dramatically, not enough to trigger alarms, no flashing lights, no raised voices, just a detail that felt wrong. A timestamp that didn't align. A data point that arrived too early. A signal that should have been there but wasn't. To most eyes, it looked like noise, an acceptable imperfection in a sea of information. To one person, it felt like a crack. A junior analyst noticed it, not because they were looking for mistakes, but because they were paying attention. They reread the report, then again, then slower. With each pass, the discomfort grew. Something didn't fit. Slowly, an impossible thought began to form. What if the threat wasn't real? What if the intelligence was outdated? Or worse, what if it had been misinterpreted from the beginning? If that was true, then everything built on it was already wrong. The urgency, the orders, the confidence, all pointing in the wrong direction. There was only one responsible option left: stop the operation. The call was placed immediately. Clear, verified, no speculation, no drama. Just information delivered with precision. Abort the operation now. 3 words, that was all. But systems don't move at the speed of urgency. They move at the speed of permission. The call entered the system. It passed through layers, assistants, protocols, secure lines, each step designed to protect authority. Each step adding seconds. Seconds that felt insignificant. Seconds that quietly narrowed the window. Somewhere in that chain, the call stopped moving. Not denied, not rejected, just waiting. Waiting for clearance. Waiting for confirmation. Waiting for someone higher up the chain to say yes. By the time the concern was validated by a second source, events were already unfolding. The operation continued. From the outside, nothing appeared wrong. There were no visible consequences, no immediate signs of error. History didn't flinch. Internally, reports were flagged, notes were added, reviews were scheduled. And then quietly, the incident was classified. The analyst was told they had done their job. And technically that was true. They followed protocol. They spoke up. They made the call. But the call still hadn't reached the president. There was no speech, no emergency address, no document released years later to explain what almost happened. Only fragments remain, scattered across memos, indirect references, conversations that end mid-sentence. We like to believe history is shaped by bold decisions, by powerful leaders in rooms filled with authority, by moments that feel inevitable. But sometimes history turns on what didn't happen. A message that stalled, a warning that arrived too late, a voice that spoke clearly but wasn't heard in time. The call that never reached the president didn't change the world, but it revealed something far more unsettling. How fragile the system already was. How much depends on timing, on attention, on people willing to question certainty even when everyone else has moved on. Somewhere right now, another phone is resting on another desk. Another light is still on. Another message is moving slowly through layers of approval. Another moment is balancing between silence and consequence. The question isn't whether history will turn again. It's whether we'll recognize the quiet moments that almost changed everything. At Virex, we don't chase noise. We investigate the spaces between decisions. If you believe the most important stories are the ones that nearly disappeared, subscribe. Because the truths that matter most rarely announce themselves. They wait.